decision.
The New York Times is reporting, citing multiple military and counterterrorism officials, quote, for months, intelligence officials had kept Mr. Trump apprised of what he had set as a top priority, the hunt for Mr. al-Baghdadi, the world's most wanted terrorist. But Mr. Trump's abrupt withdrawal order from northeast Syria 3 weeks ago disrupted the meticulous planning underway and forced Pentagon officials to speed up the plan for the risky night raid before their ability to control troops, spies, and reconnaissance aircraft disappeared with the pullout. Mr. al-Baghdadi's death in the raid on Saturday, they said, occurred largely in spite of and not because of Mr. Trump's actions. Those actions include allowing the formerly U.S.-backed Kurds to fend for themselves against the major Turkish assault. However, U.S. officials tell the paper that the Kurds continue to provide information to the CIA on Baghdadi's location, even after Trump's betrayal. And the Kurds provided more intelligence for the raid than any single country. In a tweet, the Kurdish Syrian Democratic Forces call it a 5-month joint operation. President Trump thanked the Kurds after he thanked the Russians.
I want to thank the nations of Russia, Turkey, Syria, and Iraq. And I also want to thank the Syrian Kurds for certain support they were able to give us.
Can you say what role the Kurds played in this, just generally?
They gave us not a military role at all, but they gave us some information that turned out to be helpful. The Kurds. The Kurds have worked along incredibly with us. But in all fairness, it was much easier dealing with the Kurds after they went through 3 days of fighting, because that was a brutal 3 days.
David Ignatius, we'll let you take it from there. I mean, you obviously know this region. You've been there several times, and you just have to look at what happened. And I'm sure you know this better than any of us. The heroes were, once again, the Kurds, who did quite a bit more than what Donald Trump said, from all reports. And also our special forces, our U.S. troops, men and women in uniform over there. You've seen them. They are the best that there is.
Well, Joe and Mika, let's start there. The soldiers who do these operations, the Special Operations Forces, drawn primarily from the Army, but also from other services, are just the best fighting force in the world. They operate just at a tempo, in locations that are difficult in a way that nobody else can. They also work well with other partner nations, which typically don't want to be disclosed, but it's been widely reported that France and Britain have some forces that have done similar operations. Since the beginning of this war, going back to 2014, our Special Operations Forces have conducted basically nightly attacks on ISIS targets. They've killed in the thousands, probably tens of thousands, using drones, jet fighters overhead, other means of attack, just steady, relentless degradation of this enemy. All along, the effort was to target al-Baghdadi, the leader. And one of the ironies of the operation that was announced yesterday by the president is it had to be speeded up because of the consequences of his, in many people's view, hasty pullout of U.S. forces from Syria. I'm told by my sources it was days or weeks that they had to get this done because we were losing our platforms. We were losing our ability to do an operation of this sophistication. So, you know, that's one irony. A second is the Syrian Kurds, so-called Syrian Democratic Forces, continued to act in close partnership with the United States, even after we had announced effectively a betrayal of them, leaving them to their enemies, the Turks. See you later, Charlie. Even then, they continued to provide the kind of intelligence and other support that made this operation possible. So it's just a rare partnership. You just have to be thankful for people who, even when they've in effect gotten kicked, still are willing to help you out. Final point that I would make, you made it earlier, but the tone of President Trump's remarks. This is a great day for everybody involved in this raid, and President Trump made some tough decisions. Hats off to him for that. But to call these adversaries, say they died like a dog, and that kind of language, it is inflammatory, but it's so in contrast to what President Obama said in his brief, fairly dry 9-minute account of the killing of Osama bin Laden. There's a fascinating passage in a book by Ben Rhodes, who was really his closest foreign policy advisor, in which Ben asked, Mr. President, would you like to display more footage of bin Laden's body, his burial, et cetera? And Trump turned to him and said, we are not going to spike the football. Used that exact phrase. So in this case, you had more of that taking credit, spiking the football. It may come back to hurt us, but in all, this was an operation where we had incredible support.
Mike Barnicle, you want to follow up on that?
Yeah, well, off of what David said, you know, inevitably, Joe, there is going to be an autopsy, a journalistic, forensic autopsy of this event over the weekend. We're going to find out a lot more details about it. One of the details that we're going to find out about is the president's usage of language to describe how al-Baghdadi died, crying, whimpering, running, dying like a dog. Yesterday, in speaking with two people, both with combat experience in the Pentagon, the idea that he could hear this or that someone told him this, given the chaos and the noise and confusion of a close quarters firefight that clearly happened, it's going to be interesting to find out exactly how he picked out these sounds and these words supposedly uttered by al-Baghdadi.
I mean, Jonathan Lemire, the Secretary of Defense, was asked, and he said, no, I didn't hear that. I had no information on that.
Yeah, he tried to cover for the president, suggesting that maybe he spoke to some of the commanders on the ground and was told that way. But you're right, he did not verify that at all. And to both Barnicle and Ignatius, David's point, that the first few minutes of the president's address, you know, sort of sounded like one of his predecessors could have given. But it wasn't in the 9 minutes that Barack Obama spoke very somberly about Osama bin Laden's death. This turned into a 48-minute freewheeling news conference that felt like any other Trump event. He took a shot at Democrats, feeling that he couldn't trust them not to leak details of the operations. He took a shot at his European allies, saying they were not doing enough in the region. That's where the United States had to go it alone. He gave over and over, he gave praise to Russia for helping their assistance, because they let Americans, helicopters and aircraft go over Russian-controlled airspace. It became an attempt to just unleash more and more grievances, as if he were at a rally stage rather than from the White House announcing such a victory. And this is something where he is so clearly desperate for a victory. His people around him know that he's in a very perilous political time right now, and he's going to try to milk this one for as great as an accomplishment as it is. He's going to try to turn it into the most political win he can.
Jonathan, he also, though, took a shot at the Kurds. That was what was so interesting to me. Here was the group of people who gave us the critical intelligence on the ground, and he suggested that their cooperation was in some ways brought about by the fact that Turkish forces had attacked them for 3 days.
Right.
So again, what this does, I think, it reduces the odds in the future. We have the partner on the ground we're going to need. So yesterday was a victory, but what worries me, it was a bit of a one-off, and it was short-lived, and we're sowing the seeds for problems down the road, because there's no way that Syria and Turkey and Russia are going to be consistent partners with us against terrorism in the Middle East.
Yeah, Joe,
well, Admiral
if I could...
Sreed, go ahead. Admiral, I was just going to say, I wanted to ask you again the consequences of these things, Admiral.
Yeah.
Where the president notifies the Russians but does not notify the top elected leaders in Congress, something that never happened in my years in Congress or even following it over the past quarter century. The president notified or praised the Russians first and then took a swipe at our allies, the Kurds. And of course, was the intel community that made this possible, along with the special forces. The intel community that the president has vilified since getting into the White House. It was a lot of irony yesterday coming out of the White House on what was a very good day for the U.S. military and the country itself. But once again, the president seemingly unaware exactly what he is supposed to do as commander-in-chief and president of the United States.
Yeah, again, all credit to the special forces, conventional forces who back them up, the intel community, our censor systems, the National Security Agency. There are a lot of heroes. I was surprised that we did not share this with congressional leadership. You know, I was Supreme Allied Commander for 4 years, 3 years Commander of Southern Command, 2 years as Senior Military Assistant to the Secretary of Defense as a 3-star. You know, over 10 to 12 years in this zone. We did this. Look at Leon Panetta during the Osama bin Laden. He kept Congress informed. So I think that strengthens our democracy. And certainly there's leaking. I'll tell you, the Pentagon has a lot of leaks. The National Security Council has a lot of leaks. There's a lot of leaking to go around. If you keep it tight with the actual leadership on the Hill, in my view, you will be able to maintain operational security. Last point, I want to kind of pick up Richard's thought, a very good one. Hey, will the Kurds come back and help us again? What's happening in the Middle East? I just want to broaden it and say, you know, if you're a South Korean this morning and you see that the Kurds have been kind of kicked to the curb, how confident are you in the reliability of the United States as an ally? President Trump says we're going to leave those blood-stained sands. Look, I get it. We want to get out of these endless wars. On the other hand, if you hear that and you're a South Korean, you got to ask yourself, is President Trump going to be here on the snow-covered peaks of the Korean Peninsula? If you're an Estonian, you got to wonder about the commitment of the United States when things get tough, especially if it's Russian tanks that end up rolling into Estonia. So there's a lot of regional reverberation here, but I would argue like a stone in a pond, it goes further and further into the global environment and will haunt us going into the future.
Oh, Admiral James Stavridis, thank you very much. His book, Sailing True North, is out now. And still ahead on Morning Joe, we go live to Iraq. NBC's Courtney Kube has new reporting on the raid that took down the leader of ISIS. You're watching Morning Joe. We'll be right back.
Thanks for checking out MSNBC on YouTube, and make sure you subscribe to stay up to date on the day's biggest stories. And you can click on any of the videos around us to watch more from Morning Joe and MSNBC. Thanks so much for watching.